Okay, here we are back. Here, let's get rid of that. Here we are back into our second or our second video on talking about how we run a retirement vision meeting, which is our first meeting in our process. So let's go ahead and share my screen. In our last video, we talked about kind of big picture. Remember, this is new to them. They're going to be a little anxious. We're applying for a job, but we're still the most important person in the room. And remember, Ford, family, occupation, recreation, or retirement and dreams. And so here we go. Now the next step. Here we go. Let's start revealing the three keys to success. Right. So this video. We're going to talk about what are the three things that you want to make sure you're doing in this first meeting. If you do these three things, you screw up everything else, but you do these three things, then good news, you've done a great job. And here's what they are. And I'm just going to lay them out, then I'm going to talk about them individually. First, you are going to start with a process. It is important that you have a process and that you share with your prospect what that process is. They want to know what's our roadmap, what are we doing today, and what happens next. Be an active listener. If I could pinpoint the number one most important thing you should be doing in this meeting, it's number two, being an active listener. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means, and then clear next steps. So let's see if I can find step one. Start with a process. So here is our process right here. And our process is pretty straightforward. We call it the retire right planning process. Let's see if we can make that a little bigger so we can see it comfortably. And we have this laminated in the office. If you're on Zoom, you bring it up. You say, look, we are here, right here, goals. We're step one. Today, we are focusing on your retirement right vision. We're going to talk about your vision, your goals, any concerns or roadblocks that you might have, what you've done so far, what matters to you, what doesn't matter to you. This is where we are today. And if it makes sense, at the end of today's visit, we will schedule a second meeting called a strategy meeting. In that meeting, we'll talk about your core planning areas of income, investing, and tax, and talk a little bit about what it costs to work with us. And by then, we should have a pretty reasonable expectation of whether or not we might want to work together. Now, if that makes sense, we move on to the planning process, which is step three, where we're going to start moving accounts into Fidelity and Schwab. We're going to implement income planning, investment planning. We're going to start to schedule advanced planning meetings like tax planning, healthcare planning, estate planning. And of course, once we get through all of that, and you are a client, that moves on to our service side of things. So this is all potentially in the future. Maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. Today, all we need to worry about is step number one. And that, my friends, is process. Always start with process. Let them know where you are. In every meeting, you should be pulling that document out and showing them this is where we are today. And here's what happens next, either A or B. We're in this first meeting today. What happens at the end of this meeting? A, we part as friends. B, we move on to the strategy meeting. Next, be an active listener. Now, if there is only one thing I can get you to understand, it is this. The most the highest probability of you converting a prospect to a client is right here, is in being an active listener. If you are an active listener, and if you show that, here's a crazy thought, you actually care about them, if you show that by listening, repeating back what they tell you, making sure that they understand you are both listening to them and hearing what they mean, their intention. If you do that, you have the highest probability of converting them into a happy client. This is the secret key that unlocks the doors of success in the client meeting process. So what does it mean to be an active listener? What it means to be an active listener is, first of all, you're not talking much. You're only talking maybe 20% of the meeting, but it's all about dig, dig, dig. So let me give you an example of what this is important. I'm going to give you one example here. Later on, you're going to see more and more examples of this. But here's an example. Someone comes in, you're like, tell me, I'm curious, from your perspective, what makes retirement the best time of your life? Like, what activities are you doing in retirement that makes it the best time of your life? And they say, well, we really love to travel. Really? And here are the three key words. Four words. Tell me more. That's three words. Tell me more. Tell me more about that. Where do you want to travel? Right? Where's your next trip plan? Where's your favorite place been? In other words, you don't stop at the surface. You dig. Where do you want to travel? We like our bucket list trip. We want to travel to, I don't know, Italy. We want to see Venice and Rome and Lake Como. Well, do we have that scheduled? Is that planned? No, we're thinking maybe next year. So tell me more about that. Why do you want to go to Italy? What's important about going there to you? What would it mean to you? Let's imagine you go, you have the trip of your life. How's that going to feel? What does that mean to you? And, what type of planning are you doing to make sure you can get there and that you can go? In other words, notice I'm not just stopping, hey, you want to go to Italy? And then I say, where? A lot of us say, where? Great. That's one level. But don't stop there. You got to keep asking, oh, I want to hear more. Tell me more about why that's important to you. Later on, we'll get into a lot more detail. But that's what I mean by dig, dig, dig. Simply tell me more. Why is that important to you? And just keep learning more about them. And then at the end, give them clear next steps. So I'll give you an example of that real quickly. Let's pull up our meeting process. So we say, okay, you might pull this back out and say, all right, okay, we're done here today. We've done today what we needed to. Now, in a case like yours, our next step would be to move to a strategy meeting. Here's what's going to happen in that meeting. We are going to review your core planning areas of income, investment, and tax. Those are the three big areas. We are going to take a look at how you're doing so far, and we're going to identify whether or not we can add value in your life. We will share with you exactly what those outcomes might look like, and we will tell you roughly what it would cost for us, to work with us. So say, hey, here's where you are, here's what we could do to improve, and here's what it costs to work with us. At that point, we come to a mutual commitment, meaning, hey, we should have a pretty good idea at that point whether it makes sense to work together or not. If it does, then we can talk about starting to move assets over to Fidelity or Schwab so we can move on to step 3. Remember, whatever the fees are at that point, you don't get charged anything until we get through step 3, which is getting accounts moved over and getting you fully allocated. In other words, it's you're not paying us anything yet until we've completed step 3. It's more a case of saying, okay, looks like we're on the right track, right? There. If, on the other hand, it doesn't seem like we're a good fit, then we can part as friends. Have I just given a clear outline of the next step in the process? I have. So, from your perspective, the next step is to get that on the calendar. Why don't I bring you over to, our person up front? Let's get that scheduled. There you go. If you do those 3 things, start with the process, be an active listener, and you give clear next steps at the end, no matter what you do, as long as you do that, you're good. All right, gang, I'll stop sharing. That's the end of this video, and looking forward to helping you on the next video.